Hey, so today I'm going to do a demo on grinding chef's knives. We talked about the geometry in an earlier video. This one's been forged to shape. It was the one I forged in the video earlier. It's already been profiled, and so now I'm going to grind this down to my final shape. Alright, so I'm going to start getting started here. So this knife is already forged to shape. First thing I'm going to do is just clear off the two sides. Since it's already heat treated, I do have to be careful about overheating it. One thing I like to do is I use these bar magnets from Harbor Freight. They're 150-pound pickup magnets, about 10 bucks. I like to use these to hold the knife. Not only does it help keep the blade straight so I don't have a thumbprint reflected in my grind, but it just helps me to keep a good amount of pressure and control on a very thin knife blade. So, fresh belt. I'm going to start by grinding the flats of this knife nice and flat. I got this grinder running full speed. I'm starting into the tang and grinding the nice long even passes to get that flat nice and cleaned off. Nice fresh abrasive is key. That'll help keep everything cool. I find pretty much any ceramics will work. These are Blazes I'm using here. I've used 3Ms. I like the preferred abrasive Firestorms quite a bit. Really whatever you can get at a good price will work. Everybody seems to have their own favorites. So I'm just taking a diagonal cut here. The diagonal cut is going to give me a sense of how flat my grind is by putting more of it onto the platen, and that gives me a chance to clean up the thicker spots. Once I have that so I can see it, and then I'll go back and clean it with the sideways again where it's a more aggressive grind. Now I'm going to flip this back over to the other side, and you'll notice the knife is extremely warped. And the warp is from the fact that the unhardened surface, where I had some decarb from forging, was under tension. So now I've released that tension and it's warped away from that edge. By grinding the other side, I'll release the tension on that side and then it'll straighten out. Going to repeat the same steps I did on the other side and just grind those flats flat. And don't be afraid to really lean into that belt. The more sparks are coming off it, the more heat's getting carried away from your work. So in an odd way, really grinding on it carries more heat away than just sitting there kissing it. I can usually get 2, maybe 3 knives out of the chef's knives out of one good ceramic belt. When I was using the really cheap ones from Trugert or whatever, I'd get maybe 1.5 and then I'd have to toss it and start over. So buying better abrasives is definitely worth the extra cost. When you buy these in bulk, these are about $9 or $8 a piece, something like that. Worth it. See, nice and straight now. Now that it's straight, I'm just going to work on getting this evened up a little bit. I want a nice, consistent 32nd of an inch across the whole cutting edge. Spine I care less about because I'm going to go back and regrind that anyway. I can see in this already my tip's going to need a little bit more work to refine. All right, I'm gonna thin this tip out, and then I'm gonna go through and kind of clean up the edges on the spine and induce a real good distal taper. I've gotten a fairly even thickness at the edge, about 32nd of an inch, and I want to just induce that nice parallel flat distal taper along the spine. Just removes material that shouldn't need to be there to support the knife. Won't really affect stiffness unless I go too far, but what it will do is just lighten up the knife. All right, so first I'm going to go attack that tip. Get rid of that first. And I do this without the magnet because I'm kind of refining now. And you see how much pressure I'm putting. I'm actually flexing the knife as I grind. Try to just make sure this stays centered. It's very easy to grind off to one side, so I'm going to be constantly checking to make sure that tip stayed centered. Now I'm going to grind the spine angles. First I'll kind of rough the tang in so I have a parallel flat to go by. Need to grind that to a taper anyway. So there we go. Angle down, angle up, angle down, angle up. Do the other side, make a match. Drop my magnet onto the stand, that's fine. All right. Lots of taper. And you know, how much taper you're doing here is kind of up to you. I like to see about 90 thousandths or so at the base of the knife, maybe 110 at the max. And then I like to taper down to just about nothing, and then actually taper really thin near the tip, kind of a full convex grind, just because it makes it like tip slicing a little easier. But I mean, some of the knives I've made have been up to like, you know, over 1/8 of an inch at the base, and they cut awesome. They're just a little heavier. But some people do like that. They like a heavier knife. So it's really kind of what your intended audience wants, or what you like. So I like a light knife, so I tend to grind the spines pretty thin. Too thin is possible, then they start to get a little too flexy, and then you're making a chef-size fillet knife, which can be cool too, but isn't really the same thing as a chef's knife. And really taking my time and getting that dialed in now makes life a little easier later, because now I have a reference for this taper that's reasonably straight. Because otherwise I have nothing. I have no way of knowing where anything needs to be centered onto. So having this spine as a flat that's tapering to that point and centered everywhere just gives me a little bit more reference, makes it a little easier to grind the rest of the knife in. You'll notice I'm sighting this constantly. to make sure that I am keeping that pretty straight and even. Looks pretty good. Tapering nicely. Last little touch. Okay. Now I'll go back and I'm going to grind the flats, the two bevels rather, and that'll kind of just clean those up and bring those up to closer to my new grind height. That'll give me some reference on how much I've actually tapered, and also make it a little easier to blend everything in later. Where I want, about a quarter of the way down. Not quite, even a little less than a quarter maybe. And you'll notice I'm kind of blending that section in the heel in at this point. I'm kind of trying to keep that base of that ricasso reasonably parallel. Just makes fitting up the handle easier. You can do it if it's tapered in there, it's fine, but you know, getting it all nice and fairly square does make that a little bit easier. It means you can mill the slot and, you know, fit a piece of metal up to it. Or if you're doing an all wooden handle, then it just means that nothing has to be tapered, which makes it a little easier. And it looks a little cleaner. Okay. Just kind of evening everything up as best I can. Get that edge thickness down just a little bit more. You know, maybe 30, 25 thousandths in there. A little bit thinner than a dime's width. I want to start to roll that edge in a minute, but I need to get everything else prepared to get it edged, roll it in. Just going to shine the edge so I can see everything. And now it's ready to roll the edge in. For my next step, I'm going to work on the slack belt here. And I want to roll the edge down to just about nothing. I want to be at maybe 5 thousandths all the way along the edge. And I'm going to try to get this as centered and straight as I can. I can adjust if there's a little wiggle in there now. Oh, this one looks pretty straight. I'm going to turn this at about 75%, still on the 36 grit belt. I want to deflect the belt a little bit because that's going to give me my curvature to get my last third quarter radius. Now the closer I go to the wheel, the more it'll come off of that side. The farther away from the wheel I am, the longer the radius will be and the more height the grind will achieve. I can also angle the blade a little bit to the direction of the belt, which will give me a longer radius. I like to kind of rough in the edge a little bit and then stretch that radius back. Notice I'm leaving the water on the blade this time. That way I can watch to see if the edge is bubbling up. That means it's starting to get hot and I can let it cool and get more water on it. Keep it cool a little longer. That way I don't overheat that edge ever. You can take the platen out and do this and do it on the slack belt there, but then you don't get the advantage of being able to sit water on it, which I really enjoy. So I tend to just suck up the spray. The other downside, or the upside of doing it on top of the grinder like this is it gives you a good visual of where you are as well. But it's probably not the safest method. I'll tell you that those chips that are hitting my chest are not exactly pleasant either. Just start blending that up, get that nice radius in there. Radius the spine a little bit as well. It's fine. I'm just pushing straight down so the radius is touching the spine as well. I suppose if you wanted, you could do this underneath the grinder as well. Then you really wouldn't be able to see what you're doing. I do like to sight this every now and then and just look. Make sure I'm still staying straight. Oh, just push that grind up higher and higher. You can see it's starting to be about a 2/3 or a third rather of the way up. Most of the knife. Now I'm going to start to get into that tip. And that tip, I'll bring that radius right up into the spine. So I have a nice kind of almost lenticular grind. That just gives me a little thinness at the tip that is nice for going through like soft vegetables and stuff and doing tip work with a knife. Gives it a little flexibility as well. I'm just trying to move those radiuses around and get that edge down to about a hair's width, 5/1000th or so. Even a little under is fine. I am going to polish this afterwards. I'm going to go up to about 600 grit, I think. So I probably want to leave a little bit of room, but not too much. It takes a surprisingly little to take down scratch pattern. Making sure to radius this evenly as I can from both sides so that it cuts as evenly as can from both sides. Sighting that edge to make sure it's staying straight. If I start to see it deviate a little bit, I will take some off of individual places to pull it back to center and making sure that I keep it from kind of grinding in a warp. It's pretty easy to do at this stage. Won't be much warp because the edge is only 5/1000 thick or something, but usually you can grind most of them, the ones you ground in, out. You might have to take the edge back a little, but you can do it. Most of the time. Just slowly refining that shape to that tip. Taking the edge back just a smidge. So I have a little bit more to work with again. It actually got it sharp. Looking back. Just take it back a little bit more. There we go. All right, I have this set up with a 220 grit. This is a ceramic belt, but you can use any kind of J-Flex, and a pretty soft durometer wheel. From here, I'm going to take this whole grind lengthwise, clean everything up, and start polishing. I'll bring it to about 600 on here, and then I hand finish from there. Back to full speed.
So on this, the big keys to getting this to work correctly are having enough speed. You don't want to run too slow. You run about 50%. And then you want to start movement before you touch and continue movement after you let off. Don't run the tip completely off the wheel or you'll take it off. I usually think of the tip, like the last inch of the knife, as a separate project. So I'll grind and polish the base and the heel and all that first, and you kind of have to roll the knife edge into the blade a little bit because it is a radius, and it does have some cushion, but not really enough to blend all of that in. You just kind of want to almost facet it in, and then it'll blend itself. And then when I go to do the tip, I'll put my finger right behind it, like that, and I'll actually grind my finger as well, and that way it's fine enough polish. I'm not going to really hurt myself, but that way I don't have to worry about overheating the tip or accidentally taking the tip off. I'm just getting it nice and clean and evened up. You don't want to do that. You don't want to bounce up and down, then you'll get waves. If you do get waves, you want to go perpendicular, like 40 degrees to the center of the belt, and take nice long passes so you can crest the highs of those waves. And see, they come right out. A bit of grinding more. Turn that down a little bit as I do the tip and the edge. Anywhere it's thinner, I want to run it a little slower so I can get more pressure and not have as much speed or heat. And for this, I like to keep it relatively dry because it's, again, easy to burn my hand. And it tends to, I find, glaze the abrasive a little bit if you get it wet. Unless you keep it wet. I should just set up a mister for these, but I haven't yet. Okay. Looking for all the 36 grit scratches and just taking those out. So I got it looking pretty reasonable. I will go back to that tip and clean that tip up. Put my finger right behind the tip. It goes straight up. See? And I'm actually grinding my knuckle a little bit. You can see the white there, but it's not much, and 220 doesn't really hurt. So I grind like 20 of these in a row, it starts to hurt, but 2 or 3, it's not a big deal. It keeps me from pushing that tip over the top and wiping it out, but also lets me get all the scratches off the tip. And now we get one side done, I will flip it over and do the other side. Turning it back up because I'm working the base. You also want to keep this dry because it'll flash rust. And at this point you're into the portion what's going to be seen in the final knife, so you don't really want to get too much flash rusting going on, or you can actually not be able to get it all out. or just have to do more work than it's necessary. And just repeating the process I did on the other side. Ooh, it's so exciting watching myself do it twice. And I just noticed I didn't turn this down when I went to the edge. I should have. I was risking burning that edge up. So sometimes it helps to flip the knife over to get some spots that are being a little bit pain without burning up the heel. Or rounding it off, that's also an issue sometimes. I'm doing the tip again. Again, I should have turned this down a little bit. I don't know why I didn't. Just taking the edge back a smidge. Notice that point was away from the rotation of the belt, because at this point it's very easy to fry that, or just catch it and shred that belt, throw that knife at you. And now I'm going to start to polish the spine. Just cleaning that tip up real quick. All right. Blend everything together. Now you could go straight from 220 into hand sanding and it'd be perfectly fine. I'm going to do the spine now, just diagonals. Let's get it all cleaned up there. And then I'll go on to the slack belt and just blend the round in. Just blend around. Now I've tracked the belt over one side, so I'm going to just zoop, zoop, clean up that heel. A little curve in there, I'll clean the other side. All right, 220 done.
Next I'm going to do the 400 grit. On this belt I'm actually going to use it wet. Makes the belt last longer and just kind of gives you less chance of burning the edge. So to do that I'm just going to turn this up about 50%. On to 600 grit. Each grit should take less effort than the one before. Just removing smaller and smaller scratch patterns. little scratch there I want to get up. That's ready for hand sanding.